Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I see a couple of people have already dialed in, just letting you know you're online, and we will get started a little bit after 2:30, so just hang on the line. Thanks. Okay, it's exactly 2:30, but we've got about half of the people we're expecting on the webinar, so we're going to give them another couple minutes before we get started. Just so hang on, we'll be back in a minute. This is Alex Bond. I'm the director of Eno's Center for Transportation Leadership. Also here with Aaron Shoemate, who is our senior manager for training and events. Thank you for taking the time to join today for the webinar for the nominators and supervisors of attendees of this year's Eno Mid-Manager Program. We'd like to take the time here to make sure that everybody understands what their students are going to be doing when they come to Eno, and as their supervisors, how they can maximize their investment and also get the best results from their employees. So we're going to walk through some of that today. There we go. This is just the welcome. I would underline really quick. It says I've lost connection. So
see your front page.
Should we lose connection, trust me, we'll scurry to get it back. So I'd just like to underline this year, the program was very competitive. We ended up with many more applicants than seats in the program. There are 91 people attending across 3 classes this year. So because you're here, one of your students was admitted to these courses, or one or more of the students. And they start pretty soon as 3 weeks from now in Kansas City. The mid-manager program, just for reference, goes back to about 2010 and is an outgrowth of our senior executive program. We realized that there was a market there for the mid-manager level to kind of build the people within the transit industry, build up their capabilities, and that's how we ended up with the mid-manager course. So just some quick overview of what we consider leadership, a little bit different than management. Our course is really intended to build the leadership capacity of the students in the course, really underlined, I think, by Admiral Grace Murray Hopper's quote, "You manage things and you lead people." We tend to think of transit agencies as large hierarchical organizations, but they are in fact composed of people. And by developing leadership capacity, you get better outcomes on virtually everything. So that's what our intent is with this course, and we'll talk about what some of the course content is in a little bit. I'd like to introduce the team. Here we are in photos. I'm there in the top left, on Aaron there in the top center. You may also hear from Carolyn Dorff, who works with us in the training and events part of Eno. Eno offers this class 3 times a year, so that is not quite enough to keep people on staff year-round, and we partner with a firm named Insight Strategies to deliver a lot of the content. And you see the 3 individuals who will be part of the course this year. In practice, only 2 of them are at each class offering, but those folks, the firm is owned by Kevin Catlin and Terry Fisher, and Karita Ducree is an instructor at all 3 classes. So our points here today give some tips on what you can do to bring your participant, set them up well and bring them along after they come back from the training. We want to spend some time covering the 360-degree leadership review, and that's a document you should be receiving some information on here shortly and how to fill it out. It needs a little bit of explanation and how we're going to use it. I'm going to give you a little preview of the course content and then some Q&A time. Quickly, the Eno Center for Transportation, contrary to popular belief, is not an acronym. William Phelps Eno, there he is in the top right, was an early traffic control advocate. In 1903, he wrote a book called The Rules of the Road that described the stop sign, the yield sign, and the crosswalk. He was very interested in this topic and created our organization now 97 years ago. Eno now covers all modes of transportation, really started out as a highway group. Now we're have a lot of modes of transportation, particularly transit and aviation are two areas we're making a lot of impact in. We are a neutral, nonpartisan think tank or independent think tank and partially funded by an endowment from Mr. Eno, which helps us deliver these courses at what we hope is a more reasonable price point. Our leadership courses go back to 2004. There are courses in other modes, but the transit courses are the oldest and most popular. Obviously, this is the mid-manager level 1 course. Some of you may have attended the senior executive program. That's really intended for people who are office directors or other C-suite individuals. Our newest program, the multi-agency exchange, is a technical program, not a leadership program, where people move around the country and actually visit properties and visit with people that have a similar job title to them. And we can talk a little bit about that. If you're interested in that type of program, let me know. We'll be happy to walk you through it. We have a pretty active alumni program and also do some workforce research. So here's a quick taste of what's in the agenda for the mid-manager program. We gather on Monday, go through some of the kind of big theory on strategic versus tactical activities, really talk about what the trends are in the transit industry and what's important to each individual. That's the what your cathedral is. We spent a lot of time on communications, a lot of time defining the difference between leadership and management, change management. We will touch on ethics, a lot of coaching of your employees, and some strategic things like crossing the generational divide. That's always a popular session. As you can see through the week, we spend a lot of time in impact groups. We'll talk about those a little bit more in a bit. Those are small group discussions intended for groups of then 9 to 10 individuals per class. It's a chance to test out what you've learned in class, try and troubleshoot what's going on back at your home office. You'll also see on here, we spend a lot of time with networking, a lot with our leadership panel on Friday morning is some very senior transit folks that come in to help lend perspective to what the students have learned this week. We have a couple of dinners, a welcome dinner and a recognition dinner, which functions as our graduation. So students spend quite a bit of time together and they really develop a close relationship. We know that people tend to keep in touch with their classmates and it becomes their air quotes, kitchen cabinet as they move throughout their career. If you have any questions about the agenda or anything else, please just put it in the chat box. We also will unmute, I think at the end, small enough group we can unmute. We will answer those. So throughout the seminar, there's a couple things that happen throughout. I want to highlight these impact groups really are important for gaining additional feedback, testing out ideas with your individual, with your fellow students. One thing I'd point out is the small groups. If you have more than one person from your agency in a particular class session, we will split them up for these small groups so that this discussion time can be more confidential. So that's also why if you wondered why we can only take 3 students, that's why. So we are 3 instructors at each course and each one leads one of the small discussion groups. We have quite a few application exercises. This is what everybody remembers years later, is actually building things and pouring rice into different size containers to understand how time works. But these application exercises really drive home what the lecture content is. And the part of that is teeing it up. There is a little piece of pre-reading, which is that. Can we share that with them or will they get it? Okay. What leaders really do. It's a quick read, only about 8 pages or so. Really tease up what we do all week. And then we have quite a few guest lecturers. There are 4 at each class offering. Sometimes people drop in too, it's unplanned ones. And we take at least one tour of the transit property. So we rotate these classes around the country in part so we can see the individual properties and see what they're doing. This certainly helps understand what's going on in the industry and how it affects their job back at home. So let's talk about the 360 assessment. It's a pretty important piece of the course. Now, when we have a 360 leadership assessment, it requires quite a bit of input. There are 52 different questions that are asked. People are rated by their direct supervisor, by their direct reports, by peers, which are other people in the organization, and then a kind of amorphous group called others, which would be previous colleagues, people who are 2 levels above them on the managerial chart, for example. So in the end, we need 15 to 18 people to answer this. It is largely anonymous unless you are the direct supervisor. So direct supervisor, since there's only one, pretty obvious which one you are. So people are rated on a number of different categories, things like character, their ability to embrace innovation and change, coaching people, and execution of their job, the technical aspects. One interesting part of this, people get a rating against a national data set. So there's been now 15,000 plus people that have taken this survey instrument, not all in transit. We've only got about 1,000 of those. So people can see where their rankings lie on a distribution of everyone who's ever taken a survey. So it's a useful tool for them to understand what basically percentile they are versus other managers that are out there. Again, 52 factors, and then one thing I'd say here is this is a confidential tool for the student. They get a coaching session with one of our instructors to reveal the results. It is kind of secret until then, so true reveal. But they go through where their strengths and weaknesses are. Students, though, we ask them to take their results, including when they've digested it during the week in class, and come back to you as their supervisor and go over this survey instrument. So understand that they will probably set some time aside. If you are their direct supervisor, you may need to help expand on some of your answers. But please be on the lookout for that, and we hope that all students will follow through with that recommendation to schedule some debrief time. Right, I'll just put this all out so I don't miss anything. So the direct manager feedback is isolated. It takes quite a while to do. It's 52 questions, all of which you can expand on with a typed response. They are all numbers, though, on a scale of 1 to 5. Your honesty is important here, but this is not the place to kind of blindside anyone. We hope that these things will not be a surprise on the 360 review. That inevitably happens, but I hope that as someone interested in leadership development, hopefully a few alumni on the line, that you realize that continuous communication is key to leading people. So we do hope you be very specific and leave feedback when people are being outstanding or when they have room for improvement. Be sure to write something there, not just give them a 5 or give them a 1. Just explain that, because it will be question number 1 when they get their report. And then the last is be defensible in the feedback you give, right? This is part of a almost off-book performance review, right? This never comes into play with your organization's performance review. So it's a chance to say some things there, and people understand that these employees will incorporate that into their perception of how they're working with you. Other things pre-course. I did not know I had this animation in here. There we go. I want to make sure that you meet with participants before they go. And there's a few reasons for this. It's important to explain why they were chosen. I know that some places have a very intense competition to even get nominated to Eno. In general, virtually every applicant, a student in this program, is a high potential employee, and you're sending them to this because they can go from good to great. And you should underline that and give them, make it does not feel like it's a remedial thing in any way. You should probably talk about any of those gaps where any negative items you're going to bring up on their 360, at least to steel them for that, get them ready for it. Make sure you align their expectations between you and the student and what you hope they will get out of their time at Eno. And then talk about how you're going to support them while they're there, right? And that this means taking as much, or if possible, everything off their plate for the week at Eno. I know it's not easy to say, take a week away, but as best you can, make sure that they that the work is diverted to other people, that only in absolute emergencies should be contacting a student during the Eno week. So go over with them what tasks will be taken care of by others, and make sure that their colleagues understand that they are going to this training and they should be left alone if at all possible. So again, this is after the course. Students go for a week. We do a little bit of after work with them. There's some follow-up webinars. They become part of the Eno alumni group that has reading materials. We actually have a
virtual reading
roundtable. I want to call it book club, but it's not books. It's much shorter articles, things like the Harvard Business Review. But Aaron leads those. That's why. And so there's quite a bit of contact afterwards with Eno, but the real rubber hits the road when people can bring back ideas and change the way that they're performing at work back after class. So schedule some time after the course, maybe a couple of weeks after, let them catch up, to go over what they learned, what application exercises and things that bring back. We send them back with about 5 tools that they can use with their direct reports and others around them. And just ask how you can support what you've learned. And just as an example, we send them back with an employee engagement interview, which is just a template for really getting to know your direct reports as people instead of only as employees. One thing you might be able to do is clear the deck, make sure that your other staff members know that this is an exercise that you're supporting and you should make some time with the student that went through Eno. They will have, again, some webinars, so we're going to clear a little space in the calendar for that. And then a lot of people actually have a time to have like a brown bag lunch with the student who went to the course and present what they learned. There are some agencies where there's enough Eno alumni, they have regular lunches. It's another thing you might be able to do locally. So, and then obviously check in regularly, which was the last piece of, no, it wasn't. Okay. So that brings us to really the end of what we would want to cover for the managers. I want to quickly touch on other things that are going on at Eno. Obviously, you know about the mid-manager program, and we thank you for sending a student to this. There is a second level of this course. What originally happened is we developed about 8 days of content and realized that we needed to do this in 1 week. So there are a few days of content that we've kind of tweaked a little bit. We now recommend people come back to that course maybe a year to 3 years afterwards. It really gets more on delegation, kind of the more strategic aspects of being a leader and manager. That is happening this year, so if you have other alumni, and it's happening on November 7th through 9th. Any other senior executives, maybe you on the line, we will be having that course in March 2019. We have exact dates for it now, don't we?
I believe it's the week of March 3rd.
The first full week of March 2019. That's a very different class. It's more based on guest lectures. We have 17 last year guest lectures, all very senior transit people come in and share their experience. And then last is this Eno multi-agency exchange. We now have 6 agencies participating in it. We're hoping to even double that as soon as next year. So we are forming new groups. We'll pair you with agencies that are like you, and then you can learn some technical concepts as you travel around the country and meet with folks who are tackling similar challenges. So in that time for Q&A, if there are any. Here's our direct contact information. Just a little note, we are recording this webinar for the other nominators who were not able to. Well, there's a lot of background noise. Maybe we should go back to mute.
There are no questions in the chat box or the question box. So.
Okay. So we'll just leave you with this. Both Aaron and I are available anytime. We come with a lifetime guarantee. Contact us before or after the course. There's our contact information up on the screen. Check out all this is going on at enotrans.org, and I'd like to highlight our partners on this, Insight Strategies. They have a number of resources and articles out there as well. They work in a number of industries, but also with individual transit operators. So I encourage you to leaf through the Insight Strategies website. Seeing no questions, then we can adjourn. And if you have any questions, please follow up with us.
Thank you.
Looking forward to having your students in the class. Thanks.